Time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. Debate physics also, but there's no one to debate, and that's part of the problem. It's no debaters. Yeah, so until we find some people willing to actually make counter arguments specific to the arguments being made, physics arguments, there's really not much to do, except for me to keep explaining, refining the explanation, let's call it that. And I think I have done that. I think I have accomplished the task of making it more user-friendly, more accessible in terms of explaining concepts and ideas. So maybe one of those that I'll touch upon later in this video, if we get to it, is drag. It's kind of an interesting subject about how the heat or the thermodynamics of the universe built into them some kinds of inevitabilities, but also mechanisms that can dampen the dampening, prevent the universe from immediately responding. That the universe is a little bit dull. It's not instantaneous. All of it does take time. The elemental functions are limited in terms of how fast they can react. That kind of stuff. Important. Anyway, so I did make I think a lot of good videos, and this week, and they're underappreciated, I would argue, underviewed, and all that kind of crap. So I figured I'll play a few clips from them, say a few words, blah blah blah, and something like that. So I did do one on gravity, on charge, in the context of how you would animate charge, simulate it, and this one, the double slit stuff, that one happens to be the one that's loaded now. And I did respond to a couple of people in the comments. Some of those videos I think have some pretty interesting things in them. This "You Are a Dupe," KE versus MV is a good video. But anyway, so we'll just play some of this. This is the double slit one. I think it's rather concise. I mean, it's 40 minutes, but it does have a lot of the subjects in it, explaining why the conventional model is quite empty. So I read a comment and responded to it, and so maybe we'll go to the part where I'm actually drawing. Smaller than a wavelength in terms of its thickness. Right, so this is the key fact, in the double slit propaganda, is they always put this catch, on the description of the double slit experiment. Oh yes, well the slits have to be infinitesimally small, or smaller than a wavelength, and they just kind of say it like that doesn't mean anything. Like it's, oh yeah, that just means they're small. No, it means they're insanely small. And why are they insanely small? Is because if you make 2 points, you take 2 points that are far away, then you can have differences in the length of the lines going to some location. But if you bring the points closer and closer together, then there is no difference, and you can't see any difference, and you can't notice any difference. And the same happens with our vision. If a car is far away, we can't see the two headlights because the difference in the length of the lines are the same. That's basically the problem. And it's not until it's close enough where there is a real difference in the length of the lines that we can see that there's two headlights, because the separation gets wider. The base of that triangle gets wider. So the further away it is, the narrower the triangle, the closer, the bigger the base on the triangle. And that's what makes a difference in path length possible. So essentially what they do is they take the double slit and turn it into the single slit, because it's an easier pattern to explain. But they still don't explain it because it has that double maxima in the middle, and they have no way of accounting for that with a wave theory. Wave theory doesn't account for the double maxima. Doesn't explain it, doesn't reveal it, doesn't show it. It doesn't happen with water. Alright. So, good video, really. Goes through the whole smear, all the little catches, all the little canards, built into everyone else's description of the experiment. You can't show me a single video by any physics professor or person that isn't fundamentally flawed in that it says things that just aren't true about single photons, about detecting photons, about the electron experiment. I could go on and on. I didn't do any of that in this video. But the electron experiment isn't even the same experiment. They aim the the electrons. It's a completely different experiment. And they call it the same experiment. Oh, it's the same thing. Not even close to the same experiment. Doesn't look like it, the physics of it are completely different. And that's how bad the physics is. It's so dishonest. Alright, so we'll do this gravity one. So gravity comes down to, I'll just say it. You don't have a theory, right? Conventional physics doesn't have a physical model for gravity. They just pretend there's some kind of pull thing that happens in the universe. There's some sort of magical event that happens. An electron is sitting in space, and by some magical senses, it says, oh, I'm supposed to move towards the matter thing. There's no tractor beam. There's no, force pushing. There's no mechanism pulling. They don't have ropes tied to it. Bill Gates kind of nonsense. There's nothing. There's no physical mechanism. So it's just basically saying, yes, I'll account for the physical phenomenon with a non-physical solution. And you're all satisfied. That's all you need. You don't need to do physics. It doesn't have to be physical to be physics. It can be just a magical event. The magical movement of the electron based on the fact that it can see geodesics, whatever the hell they are. Can see them, and it somehow reacts to them. Ooh, I'm in a geodesic. I have to do a certain mathematical equation to figure out where I go. Yeah, it's mockable. Sorry, I'm going to mock it because it's mockable. It's mockable that you all fall for this crap. It's just crap. In a mechanism, you don't have to explain any of the ether theory has to explain where all this wave goes. Yeah, so I made the comparison between the two. The vacuous, bent space, magic, it just moves theory versus the almost as stupid, magical ether perturbation theory thingy, which doesn't explain it at all, doesn't explain why it's a convergence, doesn't explain where the energy goes. So at least they have something physical in the universe and some idea that, stuff is just pushed in, or, it's pulled in. It somehow, the stuff moves in, but the stuff goes in, but the Earth doesn't get any bigger, and, they don't have a theory. There's no follow through. They don't take it from, here's the first step, here's the second, third, there's nothing. So at least I offer an explanation of how it's really just the origins of what we call heat, that is molecular movement. Wherever you see molecular movement, anything very small moving, anything very small materially, moving something other than the speed of light, you're creating gravity. That gravity really is just a symptom of the fact that masses, little bits of matter, electrons and protons, are moving. And every time they move, they create the effect of pushing in the direction they're moving, and obviously not pushing in the direction they're running away from, in the sense of not reflecting anything. And that is the cause of gravity. That simple mechanism. The creation of the notion of heat in the universe, that is matter vibrating, is gravity. It's the direct consequence of doing this and then doing this. That's the important one, right? This. Yeah, that looks a lot like gravity. Okay. So, next, charge. So this one is more for people who want to really understand the abstraction of it, but it really connects to Maxwell. That's what I did in this video anyways. I just tried to push it right into this idea that you can understand that even though Maxwell is an etherist and all that crap, okay, there's nothing in the formulations that require you to believe in ether or waves. And that if you really look at his drawings, what you're really looking at is things that are radiating energy. Now, I would argue that if you look deeper, okay, and it's not said exactly in this video. I mean, I'll play some of this and then I'll add the extra bit. And this one reflects, and this stops. So there's just simple rules about how the things interact, okay? So it's this 2 plus 2 plus 2 physics is basically what's being diagrammed. And all you need is a couple of simple rules to make a distinction between a proton and an electron. But the key is what's really happening is they're never producing energy. So the magnet isn't producing any extra energy. So when you have a piece of iron and it's not magnetic, and then you magnetize the iron, the magnetized iron isn't producing anything extra. Right? You didn't put energy into it, and you didn't turn on some radioactive energy. It wasn't like you started a nuclear engine and now the magnet has extra radiation to give out. It's doing what it always does. It's just reflecting the universe. You know, whatever goes in eventually comes out is the theory. That's thermodynamics. So there's this rigid rule that no matter what I put in space here, what's happening to it while it sits here in space? Well, there's a bunch of shit hitting it. The light is the obvious one, but you know there's a whole bunch of invisible radiation, cell phones, all kinds of stuff. The whole universe is spewing all kinds of little pieces of radiation that are hitting this thing right now. And all it can do is reflect it. It's not getting bigger. It's not absorbing the energy and storing it like a battery or doing any of that crap. Now, it stores some of it. Obviously, the infrared hits it. It gets hot. You know, it traps it inside of it, and its temperature equalizes the temperature of its environment. So some of that takes place. But, you know, there's no obvious... It's obviously thermodynamically... It reaches thermodynamic equilibrium. I mean, you could watch, you know, if we could see with an infrared camera, we could see that the heat of me is heating it up because it's colder than me. And there'll be a point where it'll be equilibrium. And that's all it keeps doing is equilibrium. And that's all it can do. And if I magnetize this, I haven't made it radiate something new. It's radiating the same stuff. It's the only thing it's changed is the pattern. You know, instead of it being blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, it's red, blue, or whatever. It's the atoms are, when it's magnetic, the atoms are all pointing in the same direction, in the sense they have their electrons and protons oriented in vectors, and those vectors mean from any location it will appear a certain way. It'll look red from this end, it'll look blue from this end, that kind of simple understanding. So all you're doing is changing something from, if we had the detector, you know, if we had a magnetic vision seer, you know, you'd literally see something like, well, when it's not magnetic, it's purple, and when it's magnetic, it's blue on one end and red on the other end. It still has the same amount of blue and red, it's just that it's not mixed the same. And when it's over here, not magnetic, it's all mixed up. The domains are pointing in all kinds of directions. And that's the only difference. There is no extra energy. When electricity goes through a wire, it's not making new radiation that goes out. There's no electromagnetic new field that permeates from the wire. The energy that goes through the wire goes through the wire. It does work just getting through the wire, getting to the other end. It doesn't dissipate its energy anywhere. Its energy doesn't go anywhere. It has to go back into the battery. The electrons have to go back. They won't leave if they can't get back. That's the catch. They literally won't leave if they can't get back. And so there's nothing extra being radiated. There's just the fact that when you put the electricity through, you're changing the orientation of the atoms. So you're radiating exactly the same amount of energy out of the wire. The wire isn't in any way more energetic, except for the heat part, except for the impurities in the wire where it's like a laser beam. You can have a laser beam that goes straight through, or you can have a laser beam in a field of fog, and then you'll see the beam because a bunch of photons are going to get deflected to a different path. So a perfect conductor, a superconductor, just gets rid of all the crap, okay? So it's a very clean path for the laser beam. So none of the energy of the light is being used. None of the energy of the light flies out as magnetism. There's nothing extra. You're just changing the pattern that it reflects back to the universe. You're changing where the hands are, how the hands are moving. And by changing that pattern, you change what something else that can react to those hands moving will do. Something else that's polarized. Such a big subject. Go on and on and on. Anyway, so yes, good video. All right, so then we did gravity, right? Yeah. So we'll go to this comment video. So I didn't hear back from Toady, UK. I did leave a comment responding to his comment, but no response. But it seems like somebody who's capable of conversation and engaging in a comparison of belief systems, if you want to say that, models of the universe, why he would be convinced regarding he seems to have some doubts that maybe the KE formula is rubbish. I don't know whether things I can get him to doubt, but yes, I mean, obviously I would argue there's lots of things to doubt, lots of mistakes made by physics. It wasn't an aberration that they were so sloppy regarding kinetic energy. They've been sloppy all the way through. The last 200 years has been nothing but sloppy science. Ooh, that's a good title. Yeah, it really is good. Anyway, so we'll pick a random spot. The concept of free momentum has to be dealt with because this is a new concept now. You're making more momentum. In my brain, momentum is a substance, and you can't make it. Okay, so just more of the kinetic energy kind of argument is pointing out that this idea that you're changing the energy by putting it in a different jar. I put it in a small jar with a higher velocity, or I put it in a big jar with a slower velocity, whatever, however you look at it, size of the jar versus height versus width or something. I change the height versus width, and somehow, because we care more about height than we care about width, that I'm making more energy, or there's more energy in the jar. When no, the jar is just made of the two ingredients. And I, probably in this video, I'll probably mention it somewhere in the video that, you have such an obvious parallel with electricity. Electricity provides you this perfect parallel of a system where you have, velocity would be replaced by voltage, and mass would be replaced by amperage, the volume. So you have the intensity of the pressure, and then you have the volume of the the stuff, and it comes out to watts. It comes out to your finished product. And nobody who deals with electricity would find it at all intuitive or reasonable or even possible that you could square one of those factors, that somehow it would be smart to square the voltage or square the amperage and then figure out your wattage. It wouldn't make any sense. There's no reason to do it. It's stupid. It's silly. It's nonsensical. It's not consistent with the evidence. And the same exact thing is true for kinetic energy. There's absolutely no indication in the real world that the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour has twice as much power or ability to do work than the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour. There's no reason to believe it. There's no facts in the universe that make it where it's displayed. Again, the simple argument. If 8-pound bowling balls going 16 miles an hour had twice as much energy as 16-pound balls going 8 miles an hour, why the hell wouldn't professional bowlers be taking advantage? Why wouldn't they head in that direction? Why wouldn't at least one of them use a 15-pound ball, or one of them use a 14-pound ball, when they have statistically 20% more energy if they did it? Why don't they? It doesn't make any rational sense. Why are wrecking balls huge when theoretically it would be much more economical to have small ones? Why? Why did ships launch heavy cannonballs at each other when theoretically they get more power out of their gunpowder? Per pound of gunpowder, they get more energy out of it if they shoot, golf balls. They're real questions that won't be answered with anything called reasoning or logic. They'll just be answered with, we've proven it, we've proven it. It's so proven. I mean, it's so proven. Gee, haven't you seen all the proof? No, I haven't seen any of it. Yeah, I don't see a single shred of anything called proof, or even anything called credible or curious. There's not even a piece of curious evidence. It's so unevidenced, and yet believed with a fanatic intensity that is just evidence of how silly people are, how they're just believers. They're not really thinkers. They don't understand anything they claim to believe. They just believe it because that's what they've been told, and that's what their gang says. That's what the people they identify with believe. That's their group. Ugh. All right, take a little break. I'll be back. I should be back. All right, so we'll click on this video. Okay, the dupe stuff, KE. So there should be some good kinetic energy arguments here, so we'll go find a random one. But I recall it to be a pretty good video. That's my recollection. They were starting to get this idea that it's all connected, it's all swirling around, and there isn't any miracles, there isn't any new stuff popping in to fix anything. So it's just about high and low pressure in the universe, and that the pressure, the idea of being pushed into each other is there's an equal somewhere else pushed out. If you're making two things push in somewhere, well, you had to create the pressure to do that. To do that, you had to expand something somewhere else. And so this heat, this thermodynamics, it's just moving, constantly on the move, compressing something over here and then expanding something over there. And it always has to equalize. It always, in the end, has to be, it's all the same container. It has the same amount of stuff in it, and all you're doing is moving where the stuff is causing an effect. You're just putting it in batteries and then letting it out of batteries. And we can be drawn as that kind of a machine. We're just a storage device, and we're storing the capacity to make things move. And if we don't eat for a few weeks, and then we'll start using up all of our storage, and eventually we'll just stop moving because we'll run out of the stuff that makes it possible. The batteries, the energy in the batteries will expand everything and deflate it, and it won't have any capacity to create pressure. Or else it succumbs to pressure. That's probably a better way to say it, is that everything starts to collapse. It's pushing out that requires energy. Collapsing is the absorption of pressure, and in a sense, but it's the storage of it. So that's how you store it. You store it as something benign, collapse, and you release it as something, pressure inducing. As you put it back in the universe again. So you put it back in the universe by doing this, and you store it by doing this. Yeah, that's probably a good way to say it. As we jump ahead to a quadruple, you can intensify the energy many-fold, times 10. You can get 10 times more energy, but just making that thing 150 pounds instead. So this is just more the simple argument that kinetic energy fails simple tests like a lever. That all I do is I put the same amount of pressure on one side of a lever, and all I do is reduce the mass and move it further and further out on the lever, and I keep making more energy. So I take a certain amount of energy, a known quantity of energy on one side, and I make all kinds of different energies on the other side. And the idea is it will oscillate in any one of those positions. Little small ball way out on an arm, right? Little hand, like on a clock, a little hand, way out here with a little ball on it. Big ball on the other end, close to the center. That thing will oscillate just fine. How can it oscillate, or how could it even rotate? Rotate just like a flywheel, it'll rotate. How can it do that if it has more energy on one side than it has on the other side? How could it possibly be if the light ball's flying down this side of the curve, right, of the clock? It's going around this side, the light ball on the long arm, and you're saying, yes, if I release that, it's got twice as much or 6 times as much energy as the big one up here. How can it have 6 times as much energy? And then go around, it's still got 6 times as much, 6 times. And this one has 1/6 the energy. How can the 1/6 the energy going down in gravity, there's 1/6 the energy going down in gravity, and somehow it's swinging up, 6 times more energy going up in gravity? How could that make any sense? Come on. I shouldn't even have to make this argument to reasonable people. I mean, you shouldn't even have to have a highly developed understanding of physics and mechanics to recognize that, there's no way you could take that spinning flywheel and make it uneven. If you did that, it would just fall apart. I'll make it lopsided. The weight has to be balanced. The energy has to be balanced. I can't push it down hard on one side without getting pushed up hard on the other side. I can't have unequal energies on either side of it. It's just, it's very frustrating that this is a difficult argument, to make to people, that they totally ignore it, pretend it wasn't made, make no counter argument. This make it compliant science was good too, so I might as well throw that in here. And this is just an argument about the Brozo experiment and, how poor this launcher, how you have to be aware of what you're doing. If you're hitting something, you take a spring and you hit the spring into something and that something moves, well, now you're not using the spring to do the conversion. You're hitting it with an object. And the object does have limitations. It can't give any kind of speed, and it can't give energy in any kind of form. It can only give away what it's got, its velocity. It can't regulate its velocity based on what it hits. So it can't slow itself down when it hits a big object to push the big object, and it can't speed itself up when it hits a little object to give the little object more energy. Simple little truths like that are overlooked by, these amateur scientists who really don't, even if you don't have a formal education, there are certain, you have to be able to follow along. Even if you didn't go to military school, you could figure out certain things. If you show up on the line and all the guys have iron collars and, their gun is polished and they're holding it in a certain, you figure out that, those are the procedures you have to go through. You have to be able, you have to play along. And so you don't have to be formally taught to recognize the fact that, you can screw it up if you're not careful. If you don't think through what you're doing, you could be inadvertently changing the definition of the experiment. Changing it in from a test of a spring to a test of a projectile. They're not the same thing. Projectiles do different things than springs do, All right, so that's probably enough of that. So we'll play with a couple of comments and get out of here. Yeah, pretty much. All right, so these are comments I haven't approved yet. No, these are the approved ones. So this one's on an old Ken Wheeler video. And he says, those pomegranate juice bottles are not hard plastic. They're made of glass. So it's so idiotic. I mean, in the video, Ken Wheeler pushes the bottle against a flat surface. You can see the deformation of the plastic bottle. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I played it in the video. And this idiot thinks that because, where he goes to the store, Coca-Cola is in plastic bottles, it means that there's no Coke in a glass bottle somewhere. I mean, it's just too fucking stupid. And he sits there and says, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. Well, apparently you are, because the whole point of the video is Ken Wheeler's just fooling people, because certain plastics will deform, okay, in ways where the shape actually changes. That is, you could push a bottle against a surface and the plastic will go flat. But if it's rigid plastic, if it's round and you try to deform it, it'll force the roundness to go in the opposite direction. So it can't ever lose that shape. So no matter what you push it again or what you do to it, it has to keep the same total area of the plastic surface. The surface can't get thicker or thinner or change in any way. And that's the point of the video. He's just fooling people because, yes, when he pushed the bottle against the surface, it dimpled in the opposite direction, making it look like there was a black hole. Yeah, just bullshit. So you are necessarily disagreeing with me, but you need to make sure your critique is thorough and accurate. You need to make sure your comment is accurate, you idiot. You're a fucking idiot, and it's unfortunate, you have the name Gary. But I mean, god damn. Otherwise you end up in the same boat with him. Well, that's what the boat you're in, you idiot. You didn't pay attention to the video, the original video, or any details. You just said, when I buy that juice, it's in a glass bottle, so it must be a glass bottle, even though he pushed it against the wall. I mean, the whole video wouldn't make any sense if he wasn't using a plastic bottle. The whole point of him doing it was to flatten the bottle, you idiot. God damn. Where the hell are my choices here? I guess I have to go here. So we'll just remove it, but really dumb, fella. Alright, so this is the Shadow Dove guy with the animations, but he didn't respond to my comment, and the Toady guy didn't. I made the response video where I went through all of his comments, and no response, but whatever. It's the way it is. So these are the held for review ones. Okay, so some jerk says twice, free energy systems are a theoretical impracticality. No, I think they're a theoretical impossibility. Now, what you can do is maintain energy, and that's an interesting subject, okay? It's the idea that energy is moving through the universe, and in most cases, it will be dampened out of existence by a concept of drag. That is, if you're moving into ether or a substance or energy, that you're inevitably going to encounter more energy if you're moving into it. Against its tide, against the stream. You're amplifying the stream's velocity by going against its velocity. You're increasing its velocity, and therefore would degrade any little advantage you might have had. Any little push you had will be eaten up by the stream's flow. And that's a really interesting subject, frankly. Because objects are able to overcome that drag. But that doesn't mean that free energy is impractical. It just means it's, that it doesn't change the fact that there's no such thing as free energy. Anything that gave you the capacity to motor against the tide would still have to be real energy, not free energy. It has to still be made out of existing energy. There's no new energy. But whatever. I mean, it's just such a nothing comment. I mean, you make 40-minute videos on a subject and somebody says, something just obvious. It's already in the title of the video, essentially. I mean, it's just, you're like, what the fuck? How is this a contribution? Free energy systems are a theoretical impracticality. Who are you talking to? I'm saying they're a theoretical impossibility in the video. So you didn't even watch the video, right? You just read the title and talked shit. Well, brilliant. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's not brilliant. That's just being an asshole, frankly. Let's see who he is. George Jensen. So he types the same comment on 2 different videos. You know, this vacuous mush. Of what value is it? None. So that's it. Zoot Horn Rollo relocating dirt life's work. Well, gee, that's really interesting. Whatever the fuck that is. Oh, fuck. Why do I bother? Alright, so enough of that. So, some fool online, I don't know, not a great, it doesn't instill confidence. I think springs become relevant in collisions. Okay, well, that isn't saying much. I think springs are springy. Where there is a change in direction. Well, obviously, that's exactly what's being pointed out. Is that the equation says spring or no spring. The equation says elastic collisions do a certain thing. And you'll see it with, say, cue balls, billiards. You'll see that you can shoot the cue ball at a ball and the cue ball will come back to you. Then you can also hit it where both balls go in the same direction. So the trick is that the equation doesn't mean anything, because there's a catch, regarding spin. Okay, whether the ball is spinning or not. And there's a catch regarding the actual absolute velocity. And it makes a difference. I guess what angle you might hit it at also makes a difference. How pure the collision is, whether it's through the center of the gravity, the center of the mass. Where there is a change in direction. So yeah, obviously the experiment where something bounces is because the spring, as I'm pointing out, what is a spring? A spring is a storage device. What does storage do? Well, storage takes in energy, which takes time. It takes time to store energy. And then once you store it, like a battery, you can decide to let it loose tomorrow, or you can wait a week, or you can wait, 10 minutes. So storage means that time, okay, can be extended. All right, so you're really just extending the time of the interaction. And what else are you doing? Well, you're also saying that the spring, unlike a conventional battery that only gives you 1.5 volts or whatever, and that's it. A spring can give you 3 volts or 7 volts or 2 volts or 1 volt. It can give you a different amount of energy, and that regular objects can't do. It can do conversions. You can push in 3 volts and you can get out 9 volts, at a different amperage, at a proportional amperage. So yes, the spring stores the collision. Some of the energy from the collision is stored in the spring, and then it's divvied by the spring equally to both objects in the form they would prefer. So it gives the light object fast velocity, it gives the big object slow velocity. So it gives 3 volt hunks of energy to the big thing, and it gives 7 volt hunks of energy to the little thing. But I mean, this comment doesn't really, it's not getting to any of the specifics. Yes, you're really describing what the subject of the video is. The video is really, the whole subject of the video is about how do springs change the collision. And clearly the most obvious change is if you add springs, you're going to inevitably have more energy going in the opposite direction, because the spring is going to push in both directions. It's going to take in the energy in one direction, one direction of compression, and it's going to expand in both directions. It's going to reapportion the energy, would be a better way to say it. So it's not a totally useless comment, but again, it's just so inspecific and so, vague, and I think, who cares? You gotta, I would argue is what I would like to see in a comment. I would argue that. That's the kind of beginning to a comment I'd like to see, where you actually make an argument. Be a lot more interesting to me. So it's not terrible, but I don't think it's very helpful, so I'm just going to delete it. All right, and then people always do this crap. What's your thoughts on expansion of the universe? Okay, I have made thoughts on it, but it has nothing to do with kinetic energy. So it's way off the subject. So what the fuck you posting a comment like that on a kinetic energy video for? No. The universe isn't expanding, okay? That's all just one subject. It's redshift. And physics says that redshift means that there's a constant new supply of space being created. So there's no conservation of space, right? There's conservation of energy, but no conservation of space. So they can just keep making new space all the time. The universe's engine is constantly making new space and separating everything from everything. Even though there's absolutely no evidence that the atoms inside of this thing are getting further apart. There's absolutely no evidence of it. There's no evidence that, radioactive isotopes are all becoming less and less stable over time, and the half-life of uranium a million years ago was, 1/10 of what it is now because the atoms themselves are getting bigger and bigger. I mean, it's all just such a pile of crap. Ugh. But way off the subject. Alright, so there, we're done. Alright, so maybe I'll just leave the video as that. I'll save the thermodynamic equilibrium, this argument about how the universe is really mechanically dealing with the two entities, the little bits of force that are creating all the movement, and how the matter interacts with the force. And that's all that's happening in the universe. There's just the little bits, the little BBs are hitting surfaces. And if there's more hitting on this side, then this thing will move. But it can't move very far, without being dampened by this movement. So once this stops moving, so this energy goes in, this object moves, and then the extra piece of energy continues that way. And the only way you can have a system where you can throw a wrench in space and it gets to Mars is that somehow when this moves this, the extra energy doesn't go that way. Somehow it comes back and goes this way again. It hits the tread again. So it's like the procession of a wheel. See, I sort of am making the video. The procession of a wheel can sort of be you can understand the procession of a circle as the initial piece of energy goes in this way. Everything else becomes equalized, right? This opposite that. Everything else cancels. And then you're back here again and you still have this. And so it does a circle again. And then you have this and it does the circle again. So you can sort of understand like a tank tread, where the tread comes up one side, goes further out, then comes down and then goes back. And so it just keeps processing its way through space. And so there has to be a mechanism that takes advantage of that capacity to change the direction. So you shot the energy in this way, and instead of the extra energy going that way, it goes back this way. And then somehow it converts it here and reflects it back that way. And so it essentially traps it in a circle, so to speak, or back and forth. And the simple truth is by doing that, you preserve the initial this way. So this way is never canceled. What you're really canceling is this way and then that way. That's getting canceled. But the going this way, the initial I threw it, that can't be undone. Because every time there's a reflection, the reflection is essentially a new act that'll be reflected. And so whatever way you first threw it, that energy is always conserved. The initial act, there's conservation of initial cause, essentially, in the systems. And, I'm just saying, that's a kind of a deep subject where you're going into all this thermodynamic, regulating every little bit and understanding that there's no way to, just if I had 1 million army men, I'm going to throw them at each other, and there's a rule that they equal each, one army man can only kill one army man, and that kind of thing. And it would all equal out. And all I have to do is have one extra army man on this side, and theoretically, all the rest cancel out, and this guy just walks into Hitler's house and stabs him with a fork. You know, that kind of thing. Anyway, so enough of a video. So yeah, I'm still seeking somebody capable of making video responses, somebody who wishes to do a Skype conversation or even phone, some kind of interaction with those who would oppose what I'm arguing, that conventional science is in fact silly. It's garbage, it's junk in the sense that it's so poorly evidenced. The reasoning and the logic is baby talk almost. It's so scientifically vacuous. It's so absent any of the things you're supposed to have as an argument, that the trial of the truth, facts, has been a racket, just made out of propaganda. A bunch of shyster lawyers arguing nonsense, you know, pointing out nonsense about, you know, the other lawyer cheats on his wife. You know, bullshit arguments back and forth. They never talk about the evidence on the table. You know, they never talk about connecting anything to the what you're really judging and what the consequence of the judgment is. What happens if you invent your bent space? If you pretend that you're going to say things move but no energy made them move. So that's the biggest problem with bent space, is it takes all of gravity, all the motion created by gravity, and it takes it out of the real universe. It's not real energy, you know, which is a huge mistake. All right, well, anyway, enough of a video. So I think that's it. I'll pause, but I think that's all there needs to. That's really all there needs to be. I don't think there's anything. Well, I won't even bother. Well, yeah, let's just get it over with. Okay. So this has been a YouTube update video. Most of my videos are on the website, so if you don't realize that, you have to go to the website to get to my videos. Okay, they're not on the cruddy YouTube, and you know, that's just the way it has to be. They're on this website. Just because, you know, YouTube is a terrible place. It's you know, it censors content, controls, extorts, threatens, totally abuses any notion of free speech or any kind of artistic freedom. Just it finds it obnoxious to its purpose, which is to glean audience that is compelled by advertising. It hates audience that doesn't like ads because it doesn't make any money off that audience. And it just wants the dumbest of you to show up here to watch videos. And that's not in the public interest, frankly. Yeah. So, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. So yes, this has been DraftPhysics.com and DebatePhysics.com video presentation. Till the next time and such.